Welcome everybody who is joining us. We'll get started in not too long.
Okay, so we're at 7:01, and we don't have anyone else waiting in the waiting room, so we'll get started. So good evening, everyone. My name is Genesis Heviorio. I'm one of the board members with the Lethbridge Historical Society. And today I'm pleased to welcome you to tonight's session, which is titled Third Avenue, Digging Up the Past to Improve the Future, presented by Andrew Malcolm. Before we get started, I'd like to review some virtual housekeeping items so that we can all participate comfortably during the session. First, to ensure we have good quality audio, I have muted everyone except the person speaking. And of course, if you have a question to ask during our question period, I will unmute you and you can verbally ask it. Second, we do hope your questions are answered tonight. And to make sure that, again, the audio is good quality, we will have a question and answer period after Andrew's presentation. If you do think of a question during Andrew's presentation, I ask you to use the chat, which if it doesn't appear on your screen at the moment, you can activate it by clicking on the chat button. It should be at the bottom of your screen. And once you ask the question during the presentation, it will be answered after Andrew has completed his presentation. The next point is, if you do encounter any audio or visual problems throughout the session, I will try my best to help you. So please, again, use the chat to explain what the problem is, and I will try my best. And again, if you have any questions at any point, you can comment in the chat, or you could also raise your hand, which could be activated if you click around your name. So at this point, just to make sure everyone is starting off with all the information we need, are there any questions that I can answer for you at this time? Okay, I don't see any. So with this, I'll pass it on to Belinda Krausen, the president of the Lethbridge Historical Society, to share updates as well as announcements with you.
Well, thank you all to our members and our non-members who have joined us tonight. We always have a very short meeting before the presentation. And October's one is usually the shortest of all because our AGM is in November. So most of the business will be left till next month. So I just want to actually bring a few announcements. One is that our AGM is November 24th. We will be having it as well virtually. So if you like this way, this is also how we'll be doing our AGM. And our presenter on November 24th will be Beth Songer, the architect, who will be presenting on adaptive reuse in Lethbridge. And adaptive reuse is when a building that was constructed for one use is changed into another use. And we who in historical preservation love it because it usually maintains the building so we still have it and it's still functional and used. Just so that people are aware, we are still working on one book, The Last Great Indian Battle. George Cool and Carly Stewart are still working on that. Fingers crossed that you'll see something before Christmas, and we'll certainly be promoting it on our Facebook page and in our newsletter and everything else. And those are the main things that we sort of have to announce at this time. So we will then go right into the presentation. I'll hand it back to Genesis and we can jump to the presentation.
Yes, so I'll actually pass it on to George Cool, who will introduce our speaker.
Good evening, everyone, and nice to see you virtually instead of face-to-face, unfortunately. Just wanted to say that Andrew is a professional planner with the City of Lethbridge, holding the designations of RPP, that's a registered professional planner, and MCIP, member of the Canadian Institute of Planners. Andrew was born in Calgary and attended the University of Lethbridge. He began his career working as a community intern in the planning section of the City of Lethbridge Development Services Department in April 2011. In May of 2013, upon successful completion of his community intern position, Andrew was promoted to Community Planner 1 position. In May of 2014, Andrew was again promoted, this time to a Community Planner 2 position, which he held until March of 2017. At that time, in April of 2017, Andrew accepted the position of Director of Planning and Economic Development in the town of Taber. In May of 2018, Andrew returned to the city to fill a new Urbanization Manager position in the Planning and Development Department. Currently, Andrew is the Urban Revitalization Manager, which is now part of the City Manager's Office. And in that role, as the Urban Revitalization Manager, Andrew leads the design, planning, transformation, and revitalization of the city's urban core. This role is unique and challenging in that it requires continually multitasking, balancing perspectives, including but not limited to planning and policy, economic development, historic preservation, infrastructure provision, social and community development. Over to you, Andrew.
Great, thank you, George, and to the Lethbridge Historic Society for having me this evening to present Third Avenue, digging up the past to improve the future. So just want to make sure that everyone can hear me. Thumbs up, perfect, thanks Genesis and George. As proper protocol with two young kids at home, I do apologize if there's any background screaming or getting close to bedtime, so just forewarn on that. But with that, I'm going to jump slides. So I'm going to go quickly through, or not quickly through, I'm going to go through urban revitalization, kind of the big picture, to lay a little bit of framework for what I do at the City of Lethbridge. And then I'm going to dive into the Third Avenue reconstruction project and talk about the planning, design, and construction process that we undertaken. We'll talk a little bit about what's next and then have some time for questions. So when we talk about downtowns, I've been asked this question numerous times, but why do we care so much about downtown? Why do we care so much about downtown revitalization and put so much emphasis into it, both in terms of man hours, but also dollars from a council and from a city perspective? So downtowns are really important, and we care a lot about them because they're iconic and powerful symbols for cities. When you think about any city that you travel to, around the world, the most recognizable landmarks, the distinctive businesses, the vibrant streets, and really the places that you want to be are in the downtown, or at least in the urban core. They serve an important and unique role in terms of economic and social development, as they're the place where critical mass of activities, commercial, cultural, and civic, are all kind of happening and have synergies with each other. They're the hotbed of business creativity, neighborhood activism, nonprofit enterprise, and economic diversity. So I won't go into too much about the history of downtown because I feel like I'd be preaching to the choir and probably would get myself corrected by many of you listening tonight. But really, the early downtown was a planned community by Sir Alexander Galt, including the 100-foot wide streets designed to radiate from the square, or what became known as Galt Gardens. So a little of a planning background. In the 1950s, through the recognition of the importance of downtown, specifically around balancing city development, the city made a pretty critical point or decision to expand to the west side. And a lot of the consideration with that was both that there was land to be developed, but it would also center the downtown centrally in the city. In 1960s, there was a general plan done by the city's planning department, which talked a lot about the strengthening of downtown, avoiding urban sprawl, preserving Galt Gardens, and reducing, eliminating incompatible uses, and establishing a downtown merchant group, which reflected today with the downtown BRZ. Through the 1970s, there was a number of development schemes that saw the creation of Lethbridge Center in 1975, the Provincial Building in 1976, and Lethbridge Lodge in 1978. In the 1980s, we saw the courthouse being built and the railway relocation at the center site, which saw the railway lands being redeveloped into what is now Park Place Mall. In the 1990s, we saw a number of seniors housing facilities built, the AMA, the Lethbridge Police Service building, Chapters, and Toys R Us. Unfortunately, in the late 1990s and in early 2000s, despite positive developments taking place, there was still a number of problem locations, including some derelict and deteriorating properties around the downtown. Public intoxication and loitering were becoming pressing issues for the downtown, and there was an extra pressure to do something about it, which saw the development of some pretty strategic things. So today, downtown Lethbridge is a vibrant place. It's distinguished by its rich past that is evident in architecture, streets, parks, and landmarks, which also reflects the community values that are unique to Lethbridge as a whole. Downtown is thus both a source and expression of community pride and identity. And I've chosen probably the 6 best pictures that reflect downtown, where I'm going to add a little footnote that we're very cognizant of the ongoing issues and challenges with the downtown. However, in a big picture, it's amazing to see the improvements that have taken place. So those improvements didn't take place just by chance. In 2007, City Council established the need to look and prioritize downtown. And by doing so, they began the project of the Heart of Our City Master Plan, which began in 2007. And by the completion of that master plan, they had established the plan itself, which gave the direction, the Heart of Our City Committee, and the position of Downtown Revitalization Manager. And the purpose of those 3 key pieces was to generate a viable vision for the downtown that reflected the community's values, to prepare effective strategies and tools for implementation, and then short, medium, and term actions to actually enable revitalization to take place. So at that time, it really focused on the downtown core, which is generally identified here in the dashed red focus area. But it also talked a lot about the area of influence surrounding the downtown core, which I'll talk about a little bit further. So the Heart of Our City Committee is the committee of City Council tasked with championing downtown revitalization. Their mandate is to be a champion, provide strategic leadership, and develop incentives, programs, and initiatives that promote vibrancy throughout the downtown. And a key member of that committee is the Lethbridge Historical Society. So this is just an image that I like to share to show kind of all of the different things that are considered from the heart of our city committee and implementing anything we do downtown. It's all about creating a positive, unforgettable downtown experience. And it's all about the increase of positive cues and the decrease of negative cues. So I mentioned that there was the focus of the downtown, which in this image is reflected by the red area, the red boundary kind of within the overall map. And over the last few years, since I came on with the city, we've been shifting to discussing and talking a little bit more about urban revitalization as opposed to downtown revitalization. So from 2007, the focus was really on the downtown. It put a lot of priority there because there was a lot of things that had to be achieved. And we've done a lot of work in that area over the last decade or so. So in this map, which is from the heart of our city master plan, the downtown core itself is reflected by the Scenic District, Park Place District, Central District, and the Midtown District. In 2018, we began to, again, shift the scope a little bit, and we looked at the Civic Common area, which is reflected in the orange on this map, the Civic District, and we developed the Civic Common Master Plan. Over the last year and a half to 2 years, we've been expanding further to look at the urban core, and we've been given more consideration to the Center Village District and the Upper East Side, or Warehouse District, as it's more commonly known today. In terms of your urban revitalization, a lot of the work I do, I try to figure are grounded in 5 pillars: leadership and strategy, planning, design, and infrastructure, economic development, public space management and operations, and marketing communications. I'm just going to go really quickly through these. So leadership and strategy is all about inspiring trust, inclusivity, and vision in the community, because revitalization is embedded in change, and change is very scary to the public. Even if you think you want change, when change starts to occur, there's a tendency to kind of to push back from it. Planning, design, and infrastructure. So this is really the emphasis for a good planning and design of the built environment, which includes both the private and public realm. And in context-specific built environment strategies that respond to a number of place-based identifiers in terms of responding to things like quality of life, built environment, culture, climate, community vision, etc. And so we do a lot in terms of the planning and working closely with our planning and development department. Again, as George had mentioned earlier, that was where my position formerly was, and now it's in the city manager's office, but still continues strong ties to the planning side. From an economic development perspective, we foster diverse and prosperous economy in the urban core through the development of programs, incentives, and initiatives, a lot of which are based around providing financial assistance or stimulus to kind of provoke and encourage growth and development in the core and increasing that tax base. We have a number of programs currently, and through the activity grant, adaptive reuse incentive program, which will probably be something that you can draw some correlations to with Elizabeth Songer's presentation in the next session. The housing incentive program, our targeted redevelopment program, and our Main Street facade and signage program, all of which you can find on the city's website under lethbridge.ca/downtown incentives. And City Council will actually be looking at a few amendments to those next Monday. So second last pillar is placemaking and public space management. So this is all about cultivating a safe and vibrant environment, managing the public space from cleaning, beautification, wayfinding, landscaping, and of course our favorite thing, parking. So the big thing here is about addressing and providing direction to the actual perceived safety and security issues. And there's a few images here of some of the more innovative things that we have been doing over the last few years. From the parklets to the Oki sign, movable sign, and some of the work of the Clean Sweep program and the Farmers Market, which those two programs are long lasting programs in the downtown. And finally, do marketing and communications engagement. So we narrate and communicate the identity and outward facing mission of the urban core. And we've really done a lot of focus on this in the last year with the rebranding of the downtown to try and invoke a sense of place. And I encourage you to head to the downtownlethbridge.com to check out the launch video and some of the images around the new brand. So on the go at the moment, we have about $40 million in downtown specific investment projects and planning that have either just completed, are in the process of being completed, or are scheduled to occur. This includes the ongoing Downtown Redevelopment Fund, the 3rd Avenue Reconstruction Project, which will be the main focus of the next part of this presentation, the Festival Square Plaza, which I'll tie into, the recently completed Park and Ride Transit Terminal, our housing incentive, public realm enhancements, the adaptive reuse incentive, the clean and safe initiatives, and Heart of Our City strategic planning and implementation. So there's a lot of money focused on the downtown, but it's so critical because of how much we rely on it from an image perspective, as well as the center of commerce. So with that, I'm going to move to the second part of my presentation, which is specifically on the 3rd Avenue Reconstruction Project. And hopefully this part will tie in some of that background information around why we're doing revitalization and the processes that we go through. So some might say 3rd Avenue South is memory lane for downtown. It's one of the city's very first streets. There's over 10 historically significant and 4 designated properties just between 4th Street and 8th Street, which is the focus of the project. There's a location of hundreds of community events, celebrations, marches, and protests, from whoop up days to street wheelers to protest marches, Remembrance Day, all sorts of things that I think probably Belinda would probably be best to tell you about. It was home to the Main Street cart lane from 1912 to 1949, at which time, when it was too expensive, replaced with the bus service. And it was also the main highway through Lethbridge for many more years, approximately 1940 to 1980. I've included a YouTube link here that many of you may be familiar with. It's to Belinda Croson's presentation on the streetcar. And if I can share these slides with the Historical Society, and I encourage you to check that out. So in terms of the reconstruction project, the vision was to completely reconstruct 3rd Avenue between 4th and 8th Street to create a more vibrant street that offered a safe, lively, accessible, and attractive place to work, live, shop, learn, and play. This project was not only to provide important utility and infrastructure upgrades to the street and to the surrounding buildings and businesses, but also as a way to redistribute the road right-of-way to be a more balanced approach to active modes such as pedestrians and cyclists. And then when we put it all back, to enhance the aesthetics of 3rd Avenue with some of the finishings. So this picture is just looking west on the 500 block of 3rd Avenue South in front of SAG and Galt Gardens. So to get to where we are today, it's been about a 13-year process. So to get to construction does not happen quickly. And so going back to 2007, again, the Heart of Our City master plan really started to vision what kind of changes we would like to see in the downtown. In 2012 was the Public Realm and Transportation Study. And in 2013, the Downtown Area Redevelopment Plan. So those are all the planning documents that provide the guidance to ensure that whatever we want to do in the downtown is done within some level of strategy and overarching plans. In 2014, we shifted from the planning process into design. And between 2014 and 2017 was the preliminary and detailed design process. Once designs were done, including estimation of costs, it entered the CIP, which is the Capital Improvement Program. And the Capital Improvement Program is the funding source of city infrastructure. And now we are sitting in phase 1 of construction, and we'll be proceeding to phase 2 of construction next year. So I'll just break that down with a little bit more detail. So from a planning perspective, the Heart of Our City master plan provided some key points like transportation options that are safe, integrated, and that prioritize walking and cycling, and recognizing that streets are key components of the urban experience and must be planned with this in mind. The Public Realm and Transportation Study identified that we need to change our mindset and provide a more balanced approach in terms of reducing vehicular traffic and reallocating space to the public realm, and included conceptual designs for 3 priority corridors, which included 3rd Avenue South. And the Downtown Area Redevelopment Plan discussed focusing on the public realm through the enhancement of urban design, including street trees, public art, signage, and street furniture. So all of these 3 documents really provided the groundwork that led into the design stages. So some of the design considerations were that 3rd Avenue South has a dynamic mix of historic and contemporary architectural styles, and that should provide the framework for a vibrant streetscape treatment. Creation of a pedestrian promenade with high level of street pageantry in front of major civic spaces and buildings such as the SAG and CASA. Provide three travel lanes as opposed to 4, which would allow for angled parking and enhanced sidewalk width along the north side, which interfaces with Galt Gardens, SAG, and CASA. Alternative concepts would provide parallel parking configurations on 7th Street and 5th Street, so again, to allow the maintaining of the existing street trees and wider sidewalks, both very important from a public realm perspective. Discuss plaza intersections, which will be part of the feature in front of the SAG at 6th Street and 3rd Avenue, as well as raised crosswalks, which would reduce traffic speeds and promote pedestrian priority, all things that have been considered. Varying the street surface texture, material, and color in different zones to identify what is pedestrian and what is not, and using of custom color palettes that reflects the natural landscape of Lethbridge. So I'm just going to share a couple of the images that through the planning documents in that 3-year span. So this is an image, a conceptual design from the Public Realm and Transportation Study, identifying a section of 3rd Avenue. Here's one with a little bit more detail, including the 6th Street raised intersection in front of the SAG. We then progress into more detailed planning, which includes all of the engineering to identify things like drainage, electrical conduits, where the landscaping will go, grades, and all the finer details. And our final deliverable is a rendering showing how that public realm is going to look. So this will be Lethbridge's first streetscaped, reconstructed street that incorporates that concept of streetscaping, which would bring together all of the elements that give a street character and make it functional for all uses, opposed to one or prioritizing one use. And in this case, we're specifically focusing on the pedestrian improvements. So once design again was done, we moved into funding. So the Capital Improvement Program, or CIP, is the plan that identifies required capital projects and provides a planning schedule and financial plan to achieving those. So funding for the design was completed in the 2014 CIP, and the funding for construction was approved in the 2017 CIP. Construction was funded for just under $11 million, with $7 million of that coming through the federal gas tax as opposed to provincial or municipal taxpayers. As we moved into construction, one of the first things that we did was we hired project management or contractor for project management and construction, which in the case of this project is Stantec Engineering. And the phases of construction really include 4 basic steps, from demolition and removal, utility and servicing replacement, street and sidewalk replacement, and finishing touches. So if you can imagine, you dig your hole as deep as you can, and then you work your way up, and I'll go into each of those stages in more detail. The construction project or stage has a lot to do with business impact mitigation. Obviously, with 3rd Avenue South being a major corridor, there are many businesses and nonprofits and facilities that front onto the street that are being impacted. And so through public engagement, strategic phasing, collaboration with the downtown BRZ, and a 3rd Avenue project office, where myself and the project manager on the transportation side we are doing our best to mitigate business impacts. And of course, we can't mitigate everything, but we feel quite confident that we've been able to do a pretty good job so far. We did structural assessments on all the adjacent buildings. As noted earlier, this is a corridor that has a lot of very important historical buildings, both those that are just deemed significant, but also those that are designated. And so when you're bringing in that kind of heavy machinery, we had an engineer go into every basement and go on every roof of the buildings along the 3rd Avenue corridor and did an assessment of their current condition. And through that process, prior to construction, we identified what we could bring in and what we couldn't in terms of heavy machinery. And so there's actually no heavy contact compressing going on. Everything is being basically steamrolled to avoid any excessive vibration along the corridor. And then something to pay attention to or look out for is the construction fencing. We did a project with the schools and the art program, and we have created student art into fence wrapping. And unfortunately, because of COVID and the shutdown of the school, we have just got those produced now. So we probably will not put them out until the beginning of 2021 for construction. And then along with that, the Allied Arts Council is going to be working on an art exhibition and received $10,000 from the Heart of Our City Committee to actually take old materials from the construction site, including the rails and the ties, to do an outdoor art exhibit in alignment with the grand opening of the corridor in fall 2021. So I'll just take you through visually with some pictures the process. So again, the first basic step is the demolition and removal. So in this image, you can see the asphalt milling. So it's the scraping of the asphalt surface off. And this is what the process that exposed the streetcar lines underneath. We did some testing to figure out the depth, and the depth of the milling was set as such. A couple of things that we found. So the photo on the left is a bricked manhole. So this would be the equivalent of a new sewer manhole. Obviously, this was put in place in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And the pile of rubble on the right-hand side is one of the old planters that stood on the north side of 3rd Avenue and 6th Street, just out front of Festival Square and the Gate Church. The famous rail lines that were exposed and then removed, and in the picture on the right you can see the wooden rail ties being exposed. In this picture you can see a pile of those wooden rail ties, again just showing kind of the age of the infrastructure that was being removed. Phase 2 is the utilities and servicing. So once we've done the demolition and the removal of everything that needs to be removed, we start putting in new. So here's a side-by-side of that brick manhole that was removed and a new modern concrete manhole that you can see there on the right. Also, it gives you, with the men down there, it gives you a context of how deep those trenches are dug. Another modification and critical service improvement is the image on the left shows a whole bunch of wires and different types of servicing that is kind of, and this is pretty consistent throughout the whole corridor. It's pretty chaotic. We didn't know where a lot of things were. And then there were also things that we thought were going to be in one place and they weren't. And so this project has allowed us to put in conduit in marked locations in a much orderly fashion, as you can see on the right. So any type of servicing requirements and fixes into the future will be able to be done much more consistently, lower impact and a lower cost. And again, in terms of the infrastructure improvement, the modernization, basically the whole corridor had no shut-off valves. So if any one business on 3rd Avenue between 4th and 8th Street was dealing with an issue, they would have had to turn off the water for the entire corridor and to be able to deal with it. And here's an example of a valve that allows for more planned and strategic shutoff, so it only impacts one block at a time. So now once we talk about the utilities and all the things that get buried, the things that are visible, the street and sidewalk. So unfortunately I don't have a ton of images here because we're just at this stage, but earlier this fall we were doing the grading work to establish the new base layer. And just before this most recent snow, we started doing the curb work and the new parking spaces. So on this image, I'll draw your attention to the sidewalk line on the right. That was more or less the existing sidewalk location. And you can see on the left by the cement truck where the new curb will be, the new rolled curb will be. So this just demonstrates how much, this is just one side of the street, how much land or street we are reclaiming for potential pedestrian use, and as opposed to just the vehicle on the street. And I should have had a title page there. Stage 4 is the finishing touches, which we haven't got to that stage yet on the project. So I'll just share some images from the plans. But we're talking about new stamped concrete with distinctive colors. We'll have new permanent colored crosswalks reflecting the transgender and the LGBTQ+ flag colors. And we'll have new infrastructure from garbage cans, benches, bollards, tree grates, and bike racks. So everything will be done to a new modern standard. It'll be nice, crisp, and tie everything together. So in terms of what's next, there's a few things that once this project is complete that will really build off of this first project. So in Festival Square, which is the parking area or event area where the farmers market is often held on the northern end of 6th Street, we actually have a project in place to take out those 14 parking stalls and transform it into a year-round plaza that can host the various events. And this is especially prudent right now with the pressures of COVID-19 on outdoor spaces. This project, the conceptual design work was done in the spring of 2020, and we've got council's approval to try and leverage municipal stimulus funding from the province of approximately $1 million. And if approved by the province, we are looking to have construction begin in spring of 2021 and really build right into the 3rd Avenue project there. The 3rd Avenue beautification project, which will run between 8th Street and Mayor McGrath Drive, is a continuation of the streetscape level improvement. So this doesn't include the underground infrastructure, just the streetscape improvements. A functional planning study is currently being completed, and there's construction that will probably be planned in CIP for 2025. Again, no funding's approved yet, but we'll put it forward in that 2025 CIP. The SAG modernization, obviously the main feature of 3rd Avenue is that raised intersection at the 6th Street and 3rd Avenue intersection, which is right in front of SAG. And so the SAG modernization will again be a piece that will just leverage off of this improvement. It was previously funded for $2.5 million, but has been pushed by council into the next CIP, which will be actually next year in 2021 for consideration. And finally, the 5th Street reconstruction design. So we will be putting forward in this next CIP 2021 funding requests so that we can begin the design stages of doing what we've done with 3rd Avenue on 5th Street, between 1st and 6th Avenues. It was another identified priority corridor in the public realm and transportation study, or the Pratt study. And so this would be a logical next step, especially as 5th Street and 3rd Avenue obviously interconnect at another critical intersection point on the corner of Galt Gardens. And the hope would be to secure that funding next year for the design with the intent of submitting for construction in 2025. Again, hoping that we can build off of 3rd Avenue and move forward with another corridor. So with that, I am wrapped up and would be more than willing to entertain any questions.
So at the moment, everyone is muted. If you would like to ask a question, you can either type it in the chat or you could raise your hand and I will unmute you from here. So maybe I'll start with a question. Andrew, could you talk about the collaboration that has taken place to get us to this spot, where the investment is there and the support potentially is also there?
Yeah, you bet. So there's been a lot of engagement going back, again, 13 years of different levels of conversations to talk about what the desired future for downtown is. So I'll jump more to the more present. And so in the detailed design, there was a committee established, I can't remember, the technical task force that people of businesses along 3rd Avenue and stakeholders who were involved in a lot of the decision making around, or at least the influencing of things like what types of materials, benches, bike racks, all sorts of things, as well as some things like what are the intersection designs. And then moving into the actual construction period, we've established a project office right on 3rd Avenue. We have ongoing mailing lists to all the businesses on 3rd Avenue, prioritizing those in the phase being directly impacted. And we, myself and the project manager, Crystal, are available for drop-ins at the project office to engage with either passers-by, but also businesses who have any concerns. And so we remain open for engaging and to learn about what's, maybe what's a pinch point so that we can do better in upcoming phases. But again, and a lot of learning through this process. Again, this is the first project of this kind of scale. And so our hope is to build off of that and move into things like Fifth Street and do it even better than we are right now.
Perfect, thank you. There is a question in the chat. It says, Andrew, what space is available in the downtown core for a possible performing arts center?
So I guess it's a tough question because I don't believe the Performing Arts Center group and the work that's being done has kind of nailed down a size or a type of performing arts center that's actually desired. So there's, and from a land perspective, it's quite a difference from anywhere from between 2 and 5 acres. So, and 5 acres is a full, basically the size of what Galt Gardens would be. So, in terms of available space that's already ready to go or close to getting ready to go, there's the civic common area, which is where the Civic Arena, the Y used to be, and the RCMP building. There's a couple buildings that might stand in its way. But then there's a big trigger in terms of how the city is going to manage to fund that. And one thing that I know has been at least looked at in very early stages is a community revitalization levy, which is a tax-based way of funding specific projects like that. But it relies on stimulated growth around it. And there is very little opportunity for growth around the civic common area, as it's bound on 2 sides by low density residential and bound on 2 sides by civic buildings. So it's definitely going to be a challenge to try and locate it downtown without some very strategic land purchase and consolidations.
Thank you, Andrew. And another question, is there a designated biking lane on the new 3rd Avenue? I hear bike stands mentioned.
Yeah, so on the north side of 3rd Avenue, the sidewalk will be made considerably wider, and it's will be considered a multi-use path. So it'll be about double the size of a regular sidewalk to allow for cycling. But designated bike lanes have actually been designed to be on 4th Avenue and 7th Street. So at the 7th Street intersection, which runs parallel to Galt Gardens on the east side, there will be a bike lane on 7th Street, and the design of that has been incorporated into the 7th Street intersection with 3rd Avenue. But in terms of the actual bike lanes, those will run on 7th Street and 4th Avenue and are part of a separate CIP project with hopes of actually being implemented next year.
Thank you. I have another question here. It says, what will still be completed this construction season?
Well, it's a little bit of a gray area right now. This snow that we've come across and how long it stayed around has created some challenges, but the intent would be to, in the next 2 weeks with good forecast, is to complete all the concrete work on the first phase, which is between 6th and 7th Street, finish the 7th Street intersection, and get the first layer of asphalt down. And so the first layer of asphalt would mean that we can reopen the stretch of, or the entire 3rd Avenue for the winter season. And then next year we would put the 2nd and 3rd layers of asphalt down. And then the intent would be by next fall to complete the rest of the corridor.
So one more question for myself. What is your experience going through this? This is one of the first projects, the first project the city's undertaking of this scale. What is your experience as a leader in carrying this out?
Well, I think one of the first maybe observations or takeaways is how much pre-work has to go into getting to a construction stage, especially with these projects that happen in a dynamic environment like downtown. So there's a lot of engineering that goes into any road, but a road in, say, in a new area of West Lethbridge, you have no neighbors, you're disrupting very few people, the land is flat, and you know what you're digging into. In a downtown environment, you're dealing with multiple uses, different businesses, residences, infrastructure, you don't know where it is. And so one of the things is just how appreciation for the amount of time in the planning and design stages, but also in the construction. It's not going to happen overnight. And so with that is, that's why we're thinking about Fifth Street now, so that we're not waiting 15 or 20 years before the next project of this scale gets done. It's in a quicker, maybe 5-year horizon.
Perfect. Thank you, Andrew. I do have another question here. Let me scroll up. So it reads, I'm sorry, but I'm not up to date on Festival Square. How will it differ in purpose from Galt Gardens?
So Festival Square is really just that small 12 space parking area, and the improvement would just be to ultimately put very simplest paving stones down to bring it up to sidewalk level, so that it's a usable surface that can be closed off with less barriers than it is today, to support things like a farmer's market and giving a farmer's market more days of the year to exist in the downtown. Differs from Galt Gardens in that Galt Gardens has no real flat space that can be used for anything from food trucks to outdoor seating, with electrical power and all those types of considerations in a small and controlled environment. And so this is really, if you've been down to Festival Square this summer with the closure, with the planters and the outdoor seating, it's basically just taking that one step further and making that permanent.
Thank you, Andrew. One other question. How have businesses affected by the street closure been responding to this, especially with COVID-related downturns?
Yeah, so at the beginning of, the start of this construction project aligned directly with when COVID more or less hit. And so we really had to take a hard look at whether or not this would be the time to do a project of this scale and disrupt businesses further. But after some engagement with the businesses, as well as the Downtown BRZ, the Chamber of Commerce and Economic Development Lethbridge, we felt that this was actually probably the best time to go ahead, because businesses at that time were still closed primarily. And this is probably the best opportunity for those businesses to get financial help from other levels of government. And so we definitely have heard about impacts to some businesses. But if we look at the big picture, it's actually been very minimal. I don't want to downplay those businesses that have been impacted or that are struggling, because obviously they're dealing with struggles. But over the whole corridor of who's being impacted, we've had very few concerns, and even some businesses reaching out to say that couldn't have picked a better time, and that their clients are doing well working around the construction.
That's really good to hear. Thank you, Andrew. At the moment, I don't have any other questions in the chat, so we'll give it a few moments. So in the chat, I've posted the video Andrew referred to about the history of 3rd Avenue that showcases Belinda, and she's telling the story. If you'd like to visit, the link is available in the chat. And if there aren't any more questions, this, I guess, wraps up our session tonight. Due to COVID, it's likely we'll be carrying out sessions like this in the coming months, and we do want to improve our delivery method. So if you have any feedback on how we could improve, I've left my email so you could send me your feedback. And I guess there's one more question, Andrew. It reads, this is probably unrelated, but can you speak to the space where the old YMCA civic track was/is?
Yeah, I can speak to it vaguely. So that falls into the Civic Common Master Plan area. And so with the demolition of the YMCA, all of the YMCA and its infrastructure was removed, basically backfilled, some basic irrigation was put in place, and grass was planted. The parking lot has remained in its current location and is currently being fenced off to avoid parking issues, but also to be used as a laydown area for the Third Avenue project. So right now you'll see there's a couple piles of dirt there because it's being used as basically a storage area for that project. There will be no development on that site in the near term. We're basically sitting on it as the last or the only piece of real strategic city-owned land in the core until things like either the RCMP building or the Civic Ice Arena have a different development direction. And then we will have a large piece of land that's we can strategically look at redevelopment on.
Thank you, Andrew. I'll give again a few moments for any questions. So before we close, I will pass it on to Belinda for her to share about the Alex Johnson lecture.
Thank you, Genesis, and thank you, Andrew, for that really fascinating presentation. I think we all learned a lot about the Third Avenue project and the history of what we were developing there. So November 19th will be the annual Alex Johnson Lecture. This is a partnership between the University of Lethbridge, the Lethbridge Public Library, and the Lethbridge Historical Society, and it's been held every year since 1990. And the only idea around it, it has to be on a topic that Alex Johnson, the historian, would have been interested in. And this year we have Dr. Lepre out of the US, out of Montana. So she'll be doing it virtually as well, speaking on Indigenous women and on getting Indigenous women's rights noticed and making sure that people are aware of what's happening to Indigenous women. And so we invite everybody to join us. That will be on Thursday, November 19th, and we will be posting the Zoom link to that as well.
Thank you, Belinda, and thank you, Andrew, for sharing your knowledge and your experience and time with us tonight. And I, of course, want to thank everyone else for tuning in tonight.